Hello, it looks like we are live. Hello, hello, hello. Meredith, how are you doing?
Hi, good afternoon. Still morning here, but doing great. Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Yeah, yeah. So you're putting up with some pretty intense heat over there right now, yeah?
Always, yes, Austin, Texas, triple digits Fahrenheit. I've got a bunch of fans in my office because it gets hot here. So, yep, it's the usual par for the course for August.
Nice. We had that once on one day, not so long ago. But yeah, well, thank you for joining us, and thank you all for tuning in, whether you're tuning in live or whether you're tuning in on the podcast, whichever podcast player you tend to use it from. This is VUX World. I'm your host, Kane Sims. I'm joined today by Meredith Schulz, who is the Senior Conversation Design Manager at LivePerson. We're going to get into an epic conversation about scaling conversation design teams, practices, processes, and all of that good stuff. There's going to be a lot of learnings and a lot of insights coming right up. But before we get into that conversation, I want to give a quick shout out to the Voice Summit. VUX World this year has a presence at Voice Summit. When I say presence, I mean we're actually running a conference at Voice Summit. We've got a room, there'll be 150 odd guests there, business leaders, practitioners, service providers, the whole nine yards, and we're going to be talking exclusively about how to automate your contact center. We've got Core AI as the presenting sponsor. We're going to have talks there from a whole bunch of different companies, Landry's Restaurants, Intercontinental Hotels Group, and a whole bunch more. And so if you want to be there and learn from literally, some of the best in the business, some fantastic case studies and some great insights, you can go to voicesummit.ai to find out more and get your tickets. And if you use the code VUX20, as you might suspect by hearing the number 20 in that, you will save 20% on your tickets. So please do that. You will not regret it. And the second thing, on September the 1st, I'm running a workshop, a customer experience maturity workshop with Cognigy, and we're going to be walking through how you can develop your customer experience maturity. Some of the conversation that we have today with Meredith may well actually be relevant for that. So if you are interested in figuring out where you stand on the CX maturity scale, the kind of things that you can do to advance your maturity, improve your customer experience, and build out and scale your team and your impact, then please do go to vux.world/Cognigy to register for the free workshop. And it's a workshop, it's not a webinar. So don't be turning up and turning your camera off and sitting in the corner checking your emails. You'll roll your sleeves up and we're going to actually do some work. So it is looking forward to that. vux.world/Cognigy. So with that, a timely topic and a relevant topic to that workshop is the art of scaling and the science of developing maturity in this space, which you've been doing quite a lot of, Meredith, since you started at LivePerson. When did you start there?
Yeah. Let's see. It was November 2020, so right in the height of a pandemic and everyone dealing with all kinds of new problems, and it has been quite the whirlwind, exciting, moving very quickly as our team grows and we get more customers and this industry expands. So, yeah, it's been super fun to kind of ride that wave and be a part of everything that's happening in the space
Nice.
as of recent. Yeah.
Nothing like being thrown in the deep end. We've
Always,
got
yeah. I'm kind of used to that. I've been in a bunch of startups prior to this, so the team that I'm in is actually sort of a startup within the company. So it's a
nice,
good mix of big company, but we've got a small team that's been growing, and it's been really fun to scale alongside as we
nice,
grow the customer base.
nice. That sounds good. So were you doing conversation design before that?
Yeah. So how I got into it, it's been, let's see, 2016 was my pivot year.
Nice,
Uh, Before that was in marketing, specifically mobile marketing. And so in 2016, I said, I got to go freelance. My coworkers at my job, where I was at like a mobile startup, they always heard me talking about conversation design and conversational commerce, and I basically wouldn't shut up about it. So I eventually said, okay, I got to get into this early. I quit my job. I became a freelancer and consultant and started specifically targeting companies in the AI space and would help them with both the marketing side and then also just start working on conversational experiences. So I slowly kind of built up the different customers, different experiences, a lot in B2B, a little bit in B2C, did a few SMS bots, Slack bots. Then I found one company that I ended up spending more of my time with and then went full time. And so we did bots there as well, and I worked on the conversational experience there. So that was more on enterprise B2B space, and I knew I wanted to get back into B2C. So when I saw LivePerson, had been following them for a while, was super excited about this position in the managed services or professional services team. So yeah, I took that on in November 2020 and started with a few designers, and we've since been adding to the team and adding on different roles, building out a design system. So yeah, lots of things needed to happen quickly to be able to move fast and launch for various brands.
Interesting. The so LivePerson historically was more of a BPO, wasn't it? If you go back far enough, a business process. Was it always a conversational AI kind of automation company, or was it more of a process outsourcing company originally?
So it actually started. It's been around 25 years. Our founder is still the CEO, Rob Lucasio, and it started with being the actual LivePerson in the corner of your website, so the live chat window. So they've been doing that for a long time, and then got into AI, built out the conversational cloud platform that we use today. Several years back, leveraging all of that knowledge and transcripts and customer conversations in the web, doing the live web chat. So took that and then built out a full customer engagement platform. Still doing contact center management in agent workspace, but now we've added on AI, tons of different customer engagement capabilities to basically create all of these one-to-one conversations on all the different messaging channels. So we can pretty quickly get an automated experience out on all those major channels. So SMS, Apple Messages for Business, Google Business Messages, WhatsApp, Messenger, all of the messaging channels. And then we added on voice more recently. So space and doing some things like IVR deflection to SMS, voice analytics. So yeah, really covering that full breadth of customer journey on conversational use cases.
How was the kind of adoption of those kind of like Apple Business Messaging, Google My Business, those kind of like more, I would say, fringe channels? I mean, most people when they start, they'll say, oh, we need a chatbot, we're going to do something on the website, we're going to put something in our app. WhatsApp, quite popular, it's a well kind of traversed channel. And we had Decathlon on the show a while back, Charles Goth from Decathlon, and they were doing pretty decent stuff on Google My Business. But it's not something that you hear that many people doing, and there's not many people you hear on the Apple Business Messaging channel either. I wonder if you can shed a bit of light on, from your experience, what's the adoption been like on those kind of more fringe kind of channels?
Yeah, that's actually now our number 2 channel, and then for some brands, it's actually their most popular channel, which I'm really excited to see, because I was following back when it was called ABC, Apple Business Chat. I was following that way early and got a sandbox account and was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be a game changer. So yeah, a lot of brands will still start on web, but we're starting to actually launch on, I still call it ABC. We're starting to launch on these asynchronous channels more frequently now, because customer base is primarily iOS users or Android users. And with those tools, you can create new entry points to start a conversation. So Apple has Chat Suggest, where you can actually look up, you're looking for on Google for a business's phone number, and then instead of actually, when you tap call, you're actually prompting up an option to use messaging instead. And so then your conversation can actually start and live alongside all of your friends and family, SMS messages, and we can start from there. And that's actually been growing in the last, just since I've been here. We see conversation volume shift from, oh, they're primarily web, to now, oh, we're getting more volume on ABC and GBM, which is really exciting. And so then with that comes some different use cases that we have to design for too. When someone's starting a conversation asking what are your hours today, and kind of all these different things. Can I place an order now straight here from ABC, for example? So yeah, it's kind of changing, but I think it's super exciting because that's the way people want to message. That's one of the reasons I got into the space is, you could have that asynchronous conversation and just kind of pull up that conversation as you have time in between meetings or, whatever you're doing in your day. So yeah, it's been interesting to see that and also, watch the different UI elements, get added onto those channels as well. So like Apple finally added quick replies. So we were excited about that in our team. And, that just makes things a little bit easier, but of course want to keep it conversational using NLU too.
That's a really good idea, though. I didn't realize that was the case, where you can go onto Google and where there's a phone number, when you tap it on your phone, having that kind of business messaging suggestion. That's really good, because that's what a lot of chatbots are trying to do. They're trying to intercept traffic from the website hitting the call center. And that's basically exactly what it is. And usually, though, with Apple, you don't really have any control over that much stuff because that's at the operating system level, isn't it? So for them to make that decision is actually a decision that's in favor of every business that might want to use a chatbot or might want to deflect calls from the call center. And it's being done at an operating system level, which is really unique.
Yeah, I like I said, I geeked out on it very early on. And I believe they've been slowly opening it up as the years go on. We are a partner, so we do, have a direct relationship with Apple and can work with them and also provide feedback on different use cases. So it's been exciting to, kind of see the inside look there on helping them actually update that platform for different use cases that we're seeing with customers. So yeah, there's some cool things I think they're working on. And we're sharing use cases with some of our brands as well, talking about, hey, if we had this, or if this worked this way, we could create an even more seamless conversation that maybe requires not even having to leave the chat, because sometimes we'll send external links and take someone out to complete a task or maybe pay or various things. So yeah, they're continuously building on that on both Apple and Google side, and yeah, I enjoy it. I think it's cool. I, as a user, want that. It's just easiest, and in case you forget about it, you're not held hostage to a website chat window, right? Like no one wants that. I have too many tabs on my screen. And then it also allows for things like, if you do start a message on web, think about deflecting to get someone into one of these other asynchronous channels. So, hey, this, if you start, a support ticket request on web, maybe it's going to take a day or two to follow up. You're probably not going to keep that window open. So let's move it to Apple Messages for Business and iMessage, or move it to Google Business Messages, and follow up then, and then keep that conversation open for the next time you need something, right? So I think that's a great way, and where things are headed for brands and customer engagement.
Definitely. I think that whole asynchronous stuff is really useful, isn't it? And we're not even anywhere close to scratching the surface with that. It's a little bit like the whole WeChat model, isn't it? Where you've got kind of like conversations with brands open all the time almost, and so you can just dip into your messages and kick off a conversation. And I think if you're a brand and you can get into your text message inbox and educate people about the fact that they can have persistent conversations with you in there, I think that territory is incredibly unexplored. And unlike your likes of Google Assistant, Alexa, and those kind of channels where it was a big effort to kind of get people to go there, people are already there because it's already on the phone. What kind of use cases are you seeing work well there? Is it the similar kind of stuff like the general FAQ opening times kind of stuff, or is there some other kind of use cases that you're seeing working well on the Apple front?
Yeah, I think it is definitely the use cases that require those asynchronous use cases that might take a few days. So in retail, hey, I have a question about a specific product that might be something very specific that a live agent needs to handle. So being able to initiate that ask a question and then wait for a response. That's pretty cool. And then continuously automating that down the road is something we look at, or even support tickets, those sort of things that require a few days of time in between, for the whole user journey essentially. So those I think work really well. Obviously, the usual things where, like you mentioned, when are you open? It's a holiday. Have different questions about just kind of general FAQ. That definitely, we still get a lot of that and see that. And then sort of a harder one, I would say, is more on that commerce side, which is hard to do if you're browsing products or ordering something, and doing that within the confines of a small chat window on your phone isn't probably the best. But for repeat orders, I think that's a really good one. So if you think about like quick service restaurant, that's one where someone can say, yeah, it's my Friday lunchtime regular meal, reorder, done. So those sort of things, I think, and that makes sense, right? With a long-term relationship that you have with a brand, you're going to appeal to those VIP or repeat users a lot more with this asynchronous messaging channels, right? So yeah, I think we're starting to explore that, and I think as users get more comfortable with, okay, these are the workflows I can use without having to open an app or go on the website or make a phone call, we're going to see more of that sort of behavior and getting more comfortable with that over time.
Nice. Shout out to Ashwin and Renato on the LinkedIn chat. We've got a question from Ashwin, which is, does your team do consulting, due diligence of UX and CX, or do you work only from post requirements and at the design stage? I think he's asking whether your team gets involved in the initial part of a project, which is all around use case, scoping, requirements gathering, or whether your team gets involved in projects when it comes to, okay, we've got the use case, we know the requirements, now let's go and design something. I wonder if we could talk us through a little bit about your remit and where your kind of role in your team starts and ends.
Yeah. So a little bit of both. Primarily, we know what we need to build to some degree at a high level as when we start a project, but I get involved earlier in that scoping just to ask the key questions. Is this a conversational use case? Do we have the RAID APIs? Those sort of things. We have a lot of experts on our team, even outside of the core conversation design team, though. So we have AI strategists. We, of course, have our salespeople and account executives. So everyone's sort of working towards that overall, okay, what is the right strategy for your conversational AI transformation journey? So there are those conversations. Sometimes I get involved. And often, though, we're getting that information, and then it's time to go. So we stay focused primarily 80% of the time on executing on that work, right? So there's a lot to do, and dig into the details that, of course, no one wants to think about, but we make them think about it, right? So yeah, it's definitely important. Someone needs to be doing it, and we're kind of honestly experimenting with that model a little bit now, and determining what's most efficient, what's the best use of a designer's time, who else can kind of understand this. And so I think about things like a questionnaire, a kickoff list of things to do and things to ask upon starting a project, and also the intake, the discovery of that. So we definitely do the discovery side of, okay, you don't have any conversational experiences right now. Where are your customer conversation logs right now happening? Do you have email logs? Do you have phone logs? Where is all of this information that we can start looking at to determine how users say intents and create training phrases and all those sort of things? So we've got a big discovery sort of intake process, and the discovery phase is usually a week or two, depending on the size of that brand. And our team definitely gets involved, and sometimes we have multiple meetings with a customer just on that, so we can get up to speed, because our team does act as if we are the in-house conversational AI team for our customer. So we're really onboarding to that brand, and learning about all of their business processes and terminology and brand tone of voice to create persona, all those sort of things. So discovery is a big piece, and I would say you're going to have better conversational experiences if your designer is fully involved with that process as early as possible.
And
great question.
Yeah, it was a good question. That the going from what you went from 3 designers to 10 designers, is that right? 12.
It's going on 12, yes.
Cool. So there's another comment here from Renato, actually, which I think speaks to what a lot of people will be able to relate to, which is that one person armies in these positions seems about right. His comment is, and that is typically the case with companies that are just beginning. They will find one person. They'll either bring in a person if they're going to do it in-house, or they will find someone like a content designer or a marketer, or maybe someone works in the call center, someone who understands the business and maybe can write, and they'll give them the conversation designer role. So the first project or so may well just be an individual working on the design. But then inevitably, as you start to implement more use cases, you start to implement different channels, the whole thing gets far too complex and far too overwhelming for one person. And therefore, you will have people beginning to scale the team. And so, what are some of the considerations from someone who's been through that process of building a conversation design team? What are some of the key considerations to consider early on when you're just about to kind of either go and recruit or you're planning to formulate a team? Like, what are some of the real considerations you need to think about at that point when you're still small?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I think there's that first person is, there's a lot that person is just going to learn and experiment with. So they're gonna find all kinds of learnings that then can be taken to form. How are we going to expand? Are we going to go across multiple channels? Are we going to go deeper on and create more intents? How are we really going to make this the best for our customers? So there's a lot of different roles we have in our teams, and of course they're sort of pod structure, working on a few accounts at a time, but I can share sort of those roles and how we think about that. So there's definitely an optimization layer to this, right? So you're not just designing and then leaving it. So the optimization piece, I think, is one area where you can say, okay, how can we expand and create that feedback loop that's going to constantly be improving a conversational experience? And it's awesome that we get real user utterances, and we can do that in such a faster way than you can with a web or an app experience, right? So having another optimizer, I would say someone who maybe isn't a designer, they don't have to have that full design background of UX and design thinking, but they've done sort of the growth role before, or they have been looking at customer data. Maybe they've been already in a contact center environment where they're looking at metrics and seeing, hey, where are the friction points? So someone who is sort of more in that optimization role and is going to be looking for insights that then fuel back to the designer to say, hey, I found a problem, but designer, you're going to fix that. You're going to come up with ways that we can fix that. So that's, I think, a key role. And we've had people in that role who were originally an agent or in customer support, or people who have been more on that kind of analytics and growth side, similar to like back when I was in marketing, we do sort of optimization on marketing funnels and that sort of thing. So you can find someone with different skill sets for that optimization role. And then if you're still sort of expanding, you might want someone who's more of like a product manager or bot manager role, who's thinking about how are we planning for future releases, and what's most important, prioritizing, because inevitably you're working alongside designers, right? Lots of tools, you may be able to get away without a developer for a while, but eventually you're going to want to use APIs and all these things and get a developer involved. So when you're in that setup, when you have a designer developer, someone who's sort of about that overall agile workflow, or releasing product manager sort of role or project manager is also a good one. After that, there's also sort of the NLU optimization side. Maybe do that, but if you want to specialize more of that sort of like tuner or AI trainer role, who's really just looking for additional ways to match intents and phrases and improving that NLU model. So those are some of the roles, core roles, and then expanding further could be analytics, someone who's really working on the reporting side. There's a lot there that you can think about in terms of there's different metrics handle getting someone through the end of a flow. Are they dropping off? So looking at more of that like conversion or engagement level and going deeper on specific flows to find are we measuring, do we need to 5? How do we do that, and how do we constantly have a report for that? So having someone in that role also helps, because those insights designer and can be helpful when creating the next iteration of an experience.
Interesting. So I can't remember who it was now that I've had this conversation with, but so I'm a big believer in that optimization role, and I've always said that when you go live with any kind of digital assistant, that's actually the beginning rather than the end of a project. Because unless you've done some very, very robust testing, and you've done some sampled sort of testing, like a stage rollout or whatever, and you've really been able to optimize it as part of the development process, most of the time when you go live with something, it's kind of just full of assumptions, isn't it?
Totally.
And so you've got to clean up what you've done, but then you've also got to figure out what's next. And then when you've designed and developed what's next, you've got to then optimize what's next. And then as new use cases arise, you're always optimizing those use cases. You're always searching for other use cases. You're always doing the stuff that you've just described there, which is actually, 3 turns into this conversation, this person dipped out. Why is that? And so I think that there's definitely a real need for and there will be more so in future as companies start to scale. But I can't remember who it was that I spoke to about this now. But their thoughts were, it might have actually been Shaimala Paraga, I think it might have been, who said that actually the AI optimizer role is a short-term role, because once something's been optimized, surely it doesn't need to continue to be optimized again. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on that perspective. Do you think this AI optimizer role is a role that is a core part of the team that will exist forever, and there's always things to be optimized, measured, iterated on, roadmaps to be built? Or is it actually a case that in some instances, once you create a bot that does a certain number of use cases and you've optimized that to a degree where it's working as well as it arguably may be, then that role becomes redundant? What do you think?
That's really interesting. I haven't heard that before. I definitely think as you're reaching that further end of the maturity of your AI, and you're not adding on new intents, that should hopefully the optimization cadence can be at least slowed down. So maybe they don't need to be as involved as, definitely not after the first couple of launches, because the first couple of launches are high stakes. One thing could be completely off, and you've got to make quick changes. But 2 years down the road, if there's not new intents or capabilities that you're adding, I could definitely see slowing it down. Say you don't want to just completely set and forget, because there's a lot, people change and environment change. There's a lot of other factors that might come into play, like maybe your site or app went through a big update, and now users are reacting to that and coming and asking a question about something new that was launched. We see that a lot with brands. So we always want to stay close with their other experience teams or UX teams and make sure we know the roadmap of what's coming, because we've been on the side of that, and we don't want to be reactive, right? When we want to plan ahead. But if there's not many changes there, I could see definitely slowing it down. That's right. That purpose of automation and AI to say, we need someone working on it all the time, right? So I can definitely get behind slowing it down, but definitely have an audit, a quarter or every 6 months, if nothing else, to make sure that there's not drastic, changes or user behavior changing too much and causing failure points that you didn't ever uncover before.
Yeah, you've also got the channel expansion as well, haven't you? You might start with a chatbot, but you might then go into other messaging channels. You might go into your IVR. You might think about internal use cases, whether that's HR, IT, whatever it might be. So from a business point of view, the journey for conversational AI is always that it starts somewhere, but it 9 times out of 10, unless there's some big mistakes that are made and it puts people off forever, or for a good period of time, then it's a journey. And so even though one use case may not require so much, the next channel, the next use case, may well. But another thing that an individual won't think too much about necessarily. They may have a process in their head. They may have a rudimentary system in their head. They may have tools that they use. They may have steps that they take, but it's not anything really that's formal. But then when you introduce the second designer, third designer, fourth designer, fifth designer, now you're at a point where you can't really have one person going over there doing one thing, another person going over there and doing another thing, especially if you're working on the same kind of solution. And even if you're not working on the same solution, the company wants to have consistency and quality control as far as your output. You want to make sure that you're delivering consistently to clients and stuff like that. So I'm wondering whether you can talk us through there. You mentioned going through scaling the team and stuff like that, and one of the first things you have to do is put together a design system. I'm wondering whether you can talk us through what that design system looks like for those who are getting to the point where they need to start. I would say,
yeah,
they may take it seriously already, but more seriously as you start to scale. What does that design system look like?
Yeah, and it's a living system, so it's definitely always, as most UX design teams would tell you, that have a design system, it's only as good as you keep it updated, right? So it's constantly updating. At least we try to, in other projects. But yeah, the design system actually plays in really well with the optimization piece, because we're going to be trying different patterns. We think about conversational patterns in the same way there's UI UX patterns of, here's the standard way to do a button or a form. Well, we don't really have that fully yet. We're starting to form those things in conversational design as an industry practice, but I think there's still a lot of experimenting there. So the design system, we started after a few designers joined. We said, okay, we want to move faster for our customers. Different things across different brands in our department at LivePerson. So we're starting to form, best practices and opinions on these tests and say, we tested it here, let's on a different brand or a slightly different use case and see if that works just as well. And so they can be things like more just very kind of more basic things like, how do we best, when we have to send someone out to an external link, how do we best show that and word that call to action, but also enable for follow-up questions in the chat if they have them, or it can be kind of more sophisticated things like a return user use case and kind of all the different back-end things that have to happen to create that. Or how do we do we have the standard fallback of 2 fallbacks then escalate, but how do we think about sort of the meta view, macro view of what if you have multiple fails during a session but across different intents or places? We want to create sort of like the loop counter or a way to say, okay, this person is trying to figure something out, but they can't quite. They're exploring different areas of the bot. They're trying different things. How do we make that a best experience? So we have a bunch of different sort of categories in the design system of best practices, and then some are more on the creative. Here's a way of browsing products, or here's more of like a conversational, adding more personality and different things there. So, or it can be granular, like here's a bunch of ways that people say agent, and we want to make sure that we just add that into every bot that we build. So we get to take kind of a little bit of the best of learnings and all these experiments across all of our different brands and accounts that we work on, and make the next one that we get for a customer even better. So we're sort of always, I say, one-upping ourselves. So then we put all that into, how does a design output? We're using Notion for it. And we have a bunch of cards, 60, 70 or so now. And then we link off to the component in what we use. We use Lucidchart. that then fuels into everything in the LivePerson tool. So in Lose a Chart, you can see, oh, here's that return user experience. I can work from this. Maybe I'll adapt it to the flavor of my brand a little bit, or add in something else. But at least it's a starting place to work from for the designer. And then over time, we have all those components start building out sort of like a template or starter bot, if you will, that has all those best practices and patterns in it. So when we get a new brand, we can just start there and not have to think about all these things from scratch, and sort of different common things, small talk and global commands and return experiences and context and all these different sort of things that build out a good and take it and build upon it from there.
That's really good. It definitely will expedite the process, won't it? Make things a lot quicker,
yes.
Make everything more consistent between people. How do you approach, how does something make it into the design system? You mentioned they're trying different ways of different kind of phrasing, different things. How many different ways can people say agent? Do you do kind of like active experiments on certain conversational turns and things like that? Like, oh, this use case is all about returns, and so we've got conversations that we've created that have a sequence here and there, or a series of sequences. Do you do like active testing on that and say, okay, well, now this one's good, that can go into the design system because that doesn't fail, or here's two ways that we think this conversation might go, let's just do some split testing and see which one's best? And then, like, I wonder if you can talk us through if you do any of that kind of like nuanced testing on either turns or sequences.
Yes, yeah, that's at least the ideal way we want to do it, when we have the time to build it out and we have a true, we're trying to decide between, should we do this or should we do that? Or do we want to change the current experience that's as is right now? Is this new idea better or worse? So definitely A/B testing, definitely do that. Another thing we do just to decide if something goes into the design system is talk about it as a design team. Designers are typically working on different accounts, so they're not necessarily multiple designers on one in our setup, but then we come together as a team and talk about them. And so we have actually a team meeting later today, so we'll talk about some things that someone did. They'll show it, do a kind of design walkthrough, and then we'll talk about, okay, well, yeah, could that work for this other brand? Do you have any considerations that we should change on this? Do we think this is worthy, so to speak, of the design system? And we're still kind of getting better at that because a lot of it is still sometimes a pattern. This is the first time we've had to do it. Let's put it in there. So that was more last year, and this year is a lot more of the validation and A/B testing piece of it. So definitely, hopefully next year and evolving this, there is more of the things have been tested multiple times, and we can really approval on it. But definitely starting to see that in some use cases, and that's just that's what we have to do to keep it the best it can be, is constantly kind of challenging. Is this really going to work for multiple brands, or is this just a special situation? So yeah, it's always a work in progress, but definitely testing, always test and learn. That's kind of been a theme of my whole career, honestly, even back in the marketing days, and different types of products. You've got to keep doing that, and tons of it happening here in conversation design.
Nice. What about, where do you stand on kind of like artifact production? So, I mean, I'm assuming the LivePerson platform is a relatively low code environment. Am I right? Is it your team that's actually physically going in there and building out these experiences, or do you do the design, architecture, scripting, and then another team, like development team or whatever, will actually put it into production? Like, does your team do that or not?
It depends on where that brand is in its journey. So some of our more long-term customers with bots that have been live for 2-3 years, we're doing more of that customization that does require development time. But in the beginning, it is typically more, okay, we have out-of-the-box tools for this. The designer does all of the NLU piece, or someone else on the design team. So we're inputting all of the training phrases and anything NLU, pattern matching, all of that. And then, yeah, as time goes on, though, we've seen we need to get development and we're working with APIs, and that's where things get a little more, okay, this is code versus this is a, form field input. But then we also take a lot of these things that we're building out that might be multiple different out-of-the-box features and kind of combining them in a different way. We'll put that in our design system also. And when we test the limits of it or find, hey, we needed a little bit of custom code to this feature for this one brand to make it work for them, we're able to actually go back to our product team and say, hey, this would be cool, in the future did X, Y, Z. And so our team has a great feedback loop with the product team at LivePerson too, to then make that feature even more easier in the future, so it doesn't require more custom code. So I kind of find that experience fun and plays into that too. But yeah, we use the tool, but also I mentioned Lucidchart. So I find we still need to have that full of the bot, that different stakeholders, right on the client side, non-designers, non-developers can read that Lucidchart and make sense of it to understand how is the bot experience growing, because it's not a, step one, step two, easy process to follow with natural language, of course, right? So to visualize that, we're still using Lucidchart and doing sort of the flowchart thing and documenting in there, hey, this is where we're going to use one of the LivePerson features like bot summary widget. This information is going to get from the bot to the agent. So the agent has all this information. If the conversation has escalated, they don't have to re-ask. Kind of noting specific to the LivePerson platform in our Lucidchart, just so there's a full picture to the customer and to other stakeholders of what's going on in the design.
That makes sense. That's kind of where I was kind of getting to, which is that, going back again to this model of smaller teams or single person teams moving into bigger teams, and growing that team. Some of the tools that are out there, the low code kind of tools that have got the drag and drop sort of canvas, like a lot of those tools, even the development platforms, I'm not talking about like the voice flows of the world and stuff. I mean like the Google Dialogflow CX and the Cognigies and that kind of those and LivePerson arguably. I haven't seen LivePerson's canvas, but I imagine it's something similar, whereby the design can kind of be represented in the tool. You know what I mean? Like you can see it. There's various nodes that connect to each other. You might have to go into each node to figure out what's actually going on, but there's some representation there. And so I think for the kind of immature teams or the solo artists, for want of a better word, the temptation is very much to just go straight into this tool and start hammering away. And let's just build something, let's just knock something up, let's just get it out there kind of thing. And then all of a sudden you're iterating within the tool. Whereas I think some of the kind of like more purist designers will always want to, before you do that, take a step back. Let's scope this out properly. Let's do some prototyping. Let's do some testing. Let's figure out whether we've got the narrative of the conversation right. Let's figure out whether we understand which directions it might go. And then let's represent that visually in some way so we know we're happy and we know we're confident. And then we can go towards kind of getting something into production. It sounds as though you're on the latter kind of side of that. I'm wondering whether you might be able to share your thoughts on the benefits and drawbacks of either approach. One, going straight to the tool and hammering something out. Two, taking more time, creating those artifacts and those design documents and that kind of thing. Like, what's the benefits and drawbacks of either approach?
Yeah, that's a good question. Definitely something I've thought about at different times working on conversational experiences, and I've been in that like one person role in other roles in the past. So I think there's a pro there is you can try stuff out quickly. If it's kind of low stakes or everyone's comfortable with let's just learn. It may not be good at first. Go in the tool, or if you're kind of doing the same use case and you have a good handling of here's that best practice journey, then yeah, go into the tool, save time. I think it's when you start getting more mature or long-term bots and user journeys, you're going to end up needing like, okay, wait, did I create a state? Or if the person didn't give me this thing, but is a return user, there's all these kind of combinations and states and different contexts. And so unless the tool you're using has a really good way to visualize that, I've just found it's better to go, that purist side that you mentioned and document it outside of the tool so that you're not forgetting something and you're not creating, you know, a weird or a broken journey, because that wouldn't be good either. And then as the team grows, that's where I think everyone's got to be looking off the same thing, or else you're gonna lead to bugs very quickly. And so we, even in Lucidchart, we've kind of created all these different, a legend of different shapes and colors, and everything kind of means something, and we all understand what that means working team. And so we even document like this, these 3 flows we're still designing. This flow is in QA on staging. All of this other stuff is live, because when you've got multiple people involved and you're sort of doing this agile method, people doing different things at different times, you've got to know that stuff, because something on staging, if that's misunderstood, that could create a problem. So I found the only way to do that right now, and I hope the tools, I'm sure in the next couple of years we're going to see more of this. But I've found we've got to do that at this scale in just a more of a design purist sort of view. So on Lucidchart or another diagramming tool, or however you want to document that. But that's what I found works. And I'm very curious to see how this evolves in the next couple of years, especially with the no code thing. So maybe someone will solve that and make it easier. I've definitely seen some things, just sort of being demoed in the last 6 months or so that, people are starting to, these products are starting to think about that. So yeah, I think it'll time. And then, hopefully within these tools, the conversation designer can not be so concerned with these things and these details, and that frees up time to think about, more journeys and, more proactive use cases and more personalization and variety, and kind of all these more, fun or higher level design use cases, rather than kind of all these I would say.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Because I've had kind of experience in both sides, where the diagramming tools I've used as really detailed technical architecture diagrams more than anything else. Like, this is where we need to make a call to that API here, and depending on what comes back from that, it could be 3 different things. So if this one happens, go there. If that one happens, go there. If this one happens, go there. At this point, we need to then ask a clarifying question for that, and it gets really kind of complex really quickly. But what you end up having is every single ins and outs of every piece of the conversation documented, and so there's no question then. A lot of the tools that you see will actually abstract a lot of that detail behind nodes, so that you've got to click into a node, then you've got to figure out what's going on, then you're clicking something else, and then you'll get another screen which then gives you more detail. So it's kind of like you've got the high level abstracted in front of you, but then to find out what's really going on, you've really got to dig in. And it seems as though some tools have like the canvas, the design canvas, and then behind that they'll have like a business process layer. It's almost as if like those diagrams are a bit of both. They're a business process because you're looking at API calls, you're looking at what links to where and all that kind of stuff, but they're also conversation design documents, because you've got, this is what the bot says, this is what the user's saying, here's the intent. So it's kind of like a mixture of the two that's needed, really, I think. And I haven't seen that yet, which is the ability to be able to design basically a business process, which you could call a conversation, understand the ins and outs and the nuances of every single part of it, while still keeping the integrity of the conversation. Because what happens with those large documents, I'm sure you've felt the same, which is that it might be that between one node and another, like the user might say this thing, between the bot's prompt after that, there might be so much stuff going on in the middle that when you're a designer and you're looking through it, you can kind of get detached from the conversation a little bit, because the conversation happens and it's just one thing says one thing and then the response comes immediately, and then you can feel the conversation. Whereas sometimes with those big documents, you get detached from the turn, which can be hard to piece together something that's got synergy kind of thing. I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's just a bit of an observation, which is, there's no real right way yet, I don't think.
Totally. No, I know exactly what you're thinking about, and it's easy to fall into that trap as a designer. because you're thinking about all these things, and sometimes the last thing that you end up thinking about is, what is the user seeing? All this stuff is I just created like scroll, 3 pages worth of back-end logic and all these different scenarios that could happen at this any given moment. But then if you fail on how the bot responds to the user in one of those, then you failed. So yeah, that's something I try when I do a design review or coach other designers on doing a design review, is just make sure that you're looking at it from that end user perspective, even though you are doing all of this, thinking that has to happen behind the scenes. So yeah, I totally followed what you mean. And I think, yeah, back to the point of like the different, ways design and artifacts, what's really challenging is when all of those things are in types of documents, or you have to, drill to see this. It's just, yeah, it's hard to follow all of that. So I like to see that full picture. Here's everything, and I can decide what I want to follow, into review. This is user copy. This is the backend. Rather than possibly drilling into something and a piece missing it, or then you've got like copy in one file and a diagram in another file, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's harder. And I see a lot of teams starting like that because somebody, there's either someone different doing it, or they're just kind of thinking about it in these, buckets. I find you there, you forget something, or you don't really end up looking at it in a full picture way from how the user is going to experience it. And one of the things I see a lot with that, just this is making me think about it, is when there's an error. Like, okay, they said something, we didn't have a plan for it, or the API errored, all these kind of different things. And a designer will often, because they're thinking about all that back-end logic, they're going to think, okay, problem, I'm going to write sort of that error message. Where I think we really have to do better at not showing those error messages and keep the conversation moving forward, and ask ourselves as designers, does this really need to be written in the tone of there's a problem, or this is an way that you can re-ask it just to get someone back on track, but not necessarily create this problematic, I'm sorry, I don't understand, or if there was a problem sort of moment. And if you think about what happens in natural language, that's how two people talking would interact. They wouldn't be like, problem, I'm going to tell you a problem. They would just kind of keep moving on, cooperative method, right? So yeah, I think that how the artifacts are portrayed that can help you think through moving the conversation forward, and not creating these kind of built-in responses while you're thinking about all back-end logic.
I remember I wrote something, it was a while ago actually, and it was all about how conversation design is going to get far more complex before it gets easier. Because if you look at like the large language model technology and stuff like that, and it's easy to think, oh, well, that's just going to take away all of our kind of content design needs, and all of the dialogue around content is going to disappear and all that kind of stuff. But when you actually get into it and you look at some of the use cases that you'll be working on, it's like, for retailers, for insurance companies, it's all about business processes. It's all about how you can get someone from one side of a conversation to another, having fulfilled a business process. And all of that requires thought, and all of that thought requires documentation, because you need to get out of your mind into something that you can discuss with others and show someone who's going to build it and check it's being built in the right kind of way and all that kind of stuff. It's acting how it should do. But then you've got the added kind of complexity of, okay, it's fine if you're building something for WhatsApp, but what happens when that WhatsApp turns into Apple Business Messaging? And that Apple Business Messaging has got different features to WhatsApp, different front-end UI elements, different capabilities. You can do payments in Business Messaging. You can't do that in WhatsApp. So there's all of these different channels that have got different features and different quirks about them, yet you want to still have the same conversation. And so you then need to either iterate your design file to have every single time someone says something, or the bot says something, or the customer says something, they need to be split out for different channels, or a different design file entirely for different channels. So it's going to get far more complex before it gets far easier. I'm wondering whether you can shed some light for those teams as they start to go from one channel to another channel, how you approach that. How do you approach the design of one use case really, but taking into account the fact that it's going to be on different channels and they've both got different front end UI capabilities.
Yes, that is something we talk about, and trialing some different ways of doing that in my team, and completely understand that problem of, do we design for the lowest common denominator channel? Do we design this if we know we're going to be launching on SMS? Do we just start with SMS? So yeah, we've done different things. I would say if it's the same use case, you're gonna probably have 80%, of that design should be roughly the same. So then we say, what's the primary channel that we expect, high volume on? So as we were talking in the beginning, a lot of that is now on Apple Messages for Business or Google Business Messages, or SMS. But even those three are different, right? But we'll start with the one of where do we see the users, where do we expect the volume to come, and make that sort of our primary that we focus on with design, and then add on, okay, on this specific spot, it's going to be shown as a rich link here, but otherwise it's an SMS, it's just a link. So we'll create, kind of off to the side of here's other channel. Here's the slightly different flavor of this same flow. But what I found is it's a lot harder to say, okay, separate file, separate tab for this whole channel, then do it again in this channel. And now we're just, having to update and do things multiple times, and that just takes up time. So it's better if the whole team, developers, QA, the PM, everyone's kind of behind this. Let's create, the same consistent journey with slightly different flavors for the different channels. And if everyone understands how to read that design, then we can all be aligned and kind of save time. But we had to go through a couple iterations of like, okay, I have to make this change in 3 places and 3 files. We had to go through that pain a little bit before we worked towards, a more collective way to do it faster. But I will say, then there's the element of, okay, now we're on different channels, and maybe because the entry points are different, you're going to get different user utterances that you need to train for, and you're going to end up with a little bit of different NLU models as you start optimizing down, because now your use case is diverging a little bit between the channels, and people want something different, on an asynchronous channel than they do on the web, for example. They're going to ask questions, or they're going to say it in a different way. So then you start getting a little more sophisticated, and if it starts becoming of a lot of diverging design, then you might need to expand that and say, here's a whole separate tab for the way this starts. It's different on Apple than it is on web. That sort of a thing.
Interesting. That's really good. I definitely like the remove the waste. Not do things 3 times. It's all about efficiency. That's good. Any kind of like final thoughts on advice or insights that you could share with conversation design teams who are going through that process of going from either one-off you to many?
Your learnings, and don't assume that there is one best way to do something. We're definitely in that experimentation phase of conversation design. I do not assume I know everything. I'm always learning something every day from either other designers or customers. Like we can always be humbled. So just having a very open and transparent discussion about things with your team, way to creating that culture of, okay, we're going to keep optimizing, we're going to keep learning, we're going to keep making this better. We might fail a few times, but that's a learning. So feel good about if you tried something and it didn't work, because another designer can use that down the road, right? We can document that. So it's hard. I know how that feels, and it feels like, what am I doing? There's no defined, way of doing this. But I find that once you realize, okay, we're going to be experimenting, then it's kind of freeing and it can be fun. So yeah, just shout out to everybody that, especially the lone conversation designer out there. I much respect. Keep going on the slog. You're learning a lot of cool things. You don't even know it yet.
Nice. That is really good. Nice way to wrap up. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Meredith. This has been absolutely unbelievable. I will put the links to LivePerson. I'll put the links to the Conversational Collective. I know there's a really good meetup that you run. Lots of really good content on there, on the YouTube channel and all that kind of stuff. So I'll definitely advise people to go and sign up to that. I'll put that link in there. Don't forget to go to voicesummit.ai. Use promo code VUX20 to get 20% off your tickets for the Voice Summit, VUX at Voice, the whole day long of contact center automation content. You will not regret it. And the Cognigy workshop that we're doing on CX automation is next week. Is it next week? Week after next, September the 1st. Go to vux.world/Cognigy to join that one. Meredith, this has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It was super